Okay, sorry guys, I didn't actually upload the intro for the show. I got the wrong intro, so sorry guys, but we're gonna start going live right now. Stefan, Leighton, Stefan, you had a wonderful experience yesterday, and I think that's where everybody's gonna start. So I'll jump off into the background. Have a great show, guys.
Thanks, Ken, as always. Yeah, please come on, bring it on, brother.
Well, welcome everybody. Thanks, Leighton, for having me. Ken, for producing. I always enjoy being on. It's all about the biology. This is number 2. I know that we were going to do another talk, and this was actually going to be probably more about Mother Earth and energy and soil and everything. But I had this crazy experience last night and also like 3 nights ago. And then I saw some things this summer in Ukraine where there's no air traffic. So some weird like UAP phenomenon. And I figured that I should just like do a disclosure of what I've seen and experienced because I think other people have seen and experienced a lot more after last night, which was like the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. I feel like I should just add my voice and my experience to this whole like disclosure phenomenon. And so I was going to make a video myself on it, but then we had this already scheduled. And I was like, well, I'm just one person. You can help me to see different things or ask questions. And, it's better to have a conversation with someone. So I appreciate you hosting.
Oh, hey, it's an honor. I'm blessed to get to hear about this experience firsthand.
Yeah. So I guess just to dive right into it, I was in San Francisco last night. And I was actually had a little bit of guidance from Spirit to just say yes to things. So there was this party last night that I was invited to, and I was like, okay, it's a drive, but let's just like say yes and go there, even just for a couple hours. So I was at this party, really nice. It was a lot of interesting people. We're talking about astrology and everything. There's like a very notable astrologer who was there. So it was just a kind of a cool place. And then I was driving back from San Francisco to Napa. So you have to go over the Bay Bridge for people that know California. You have to go over the Bay Bridge. You're going up 80. And then you start to go through Oakland, and then it's like Pinole and Hercules and some of these towns along the northern part of the bay on the east side before you then take a bridge and cross over to North Bay. And so I created this graphic behind me. This is effectively what I saw from a distance for like 10 plus minutes. And also just hi everyone. I see you all. We're seeing a whole bunch of comments in the chat. So glad you're all here, folks. And so I was driving and I saw this light is like basically that bright. Like I did my best to make this look like what I actually saw. I just photoshopped this, right? And it was basically that bright. And I was like, what is that? Like, that must be something either really close to me or it's like, I started thinking, I was like, it wasn't moving like a plane would. A plane's pretty clear. It like goes like this, it moves over. It would have changed position. But as I was driving on the highway, it stayed fixed in location. And it wasn't any sort of like street light, right? Because you're going to drive past a street light. And this thing was the brightest thing in the sky, like the sky by far. Like Jupiter is very bright. Sirius is very bright. This thing was like at least an order of magnitude or 2 orders of magnitude brighter. So then I started thinking, is this a supernova? Like, did we have a supernova? Like they happen. I mean, in the historical record, people write down supernova, 3 weeks, visible during the daytime. That's how strong they can be. So I'm like, well, that would be a supernova. Like that's so bright. That could be like a freaking supernova that is blasted off. So my mind was spinning. I'm like, this is insane. I had to get confirmation. It was like 12 a.m. So I called my mom. She didn't pick up immediately. I called my dad. He did pick up. And I asked him to go outside to see if he could see the supernova because he's in Sonoma. So he's north of me. But it's big enough difference that if it's a local phenomenon, he won't see it. And but right as we started talking, it turned out I was actually getting really close to it and I was driving underneath it and it was stationary over the highway. So what I saw was this bright golden light, which had this purple aura to it. There was these purple colors that were surrounding it, and but it was this really strong golden light, just like this, and a little bit like this purple. So I was kind of thinking like this almost looks like a plasma thing, like some sort of like plasma, or it was weird. It was way brighter than any like plane. You know, they have marker lights,
Yep.
way brighter than that. Because why would a plane expend that much energy? Like light is energy, so it takes energy to light these things up. And this was super bright. So then as I'm getting closer, I'm like seeing like this is like literally right over the highway. And as I'm getting closer, I'm slowing down my car. Now I'm going maybe like 50 miles per hour. Like I'm on the highway, so unfortunately I can't stop. And I don't have a good phone with me. I have my iPhone 10, which doesn't have night mode. Whereas the new iPhones you can do like low light photography with. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to get a video. I tried, but it was just pitch black on my screen. And so as I start to get underneath this thing, I look up and I see that it's actually stationary over the highway. Or if it's not stationary, it's moving extremely slowly. It's not a plane coming into land because there's no airports in that area. Oakland Airport is south because I was north of Oakland at this point. San Francisco is off to the southwest. Santa Rosa is pretty far north. It would not be at a low altitude for Santa Rosa. Napa Airport's very tiny. It's the way north. It would not be low altitude for that area. And then Concord Airport is to the southeast, like southeast east. And if it was going a direction, it was going north, not south. So it doesn't make sense for any of the airports. And so I look up and I actually see this like square, like imagine like a box, like a square, like a cube, right? But tilted on its side, so it almost looks like a diamond, but it's a cube. And there was a little red light on each corner of it. And a little later on, I'll do a sketch, a bad sketch, and it had a little red light on each corner, almost like a little bit of like a identifier. Because when I was calling my dad, that's when I was like, wait, this isn't a supernova because I saw the red lights and I saw them blinking. But then I was underneath it and I see this cube. And in the center is where that light was. And it was this extremely strong golden light with purple light also emanating from it. And so it was like some sort of, I mean, I don't know what it was, but my thought with what I know is that it was some sort of like plasma device, like some plasma engine. And we could talk about the physics of that too. It was like some sort of plasma engine within this like cubic structure around it. And it was just hovering there like 300 feet up. And as I drove underneath, like literally every hair on my body stood up. It was the freakiest thing. It's like, Jesus, like what was that? I never expected to, I'm going to close the door really quick.
We can't
Okay,
hear
we
you.
lost your audio, Stefan.
Oh, my back.
There you are.
Okay, I never expected to see a UFO. You hear these stories. I've seen some other things I'll talk about in just a little bit, but I mean, I wanted to share this, so I'm happy to share this on the podcast and just have a conversation around this because we're entering into that like age Pluto and Aquarius, and a lot of people have been talking about UAP disclosures, and now I'm like seeing, like I drove like underneath like this fucking crazy UFO. So, and there were some other things that happened a couple nights ago, which were weird. And
So while we're on this subject, could you describe how big it was as you drove under it? Was it hundreds of feet, thousands of feet? Was it big or kind of small?
It was kind of small. It was like, I mean, it's kind of hard to estimate when you're driving and everything, but it seemed to be about like within 500 feet up. So no more than like, it wasn't like super up there. It was like 500 feet up. It's pretty low. I mean, maybe a little higher, but not terribly high up. And it was like, take like two big trucks and like put them together into like a square, like a cube, right? And it was like the size of that. So like a fairly
Like
size,
60 by 60.
maybe not 60 by 60, maybe like, I don't know, actually, it's kind of hard to say, but no more than like 50 by 50 feet. Like 50
Okay.
by 50. That's probably much larger than it was, but it also wasn't tiny. It wasn't some little thing. It wasn't a drone. Like it's not like someone shot a drone up there. And the reason why I'm very confident in saying it wasn't a drone or a plane is because of how bright it was. I mean, this thing was like, I mean, I was seeing it this bright from like 10, 12 miles away. I had this entire drive up to it on the highway for a good 10 minutes where I was trying to figure out what it was. And that's why I thought it was a supernova because it was so bright and it wasn't changing position and it's not a star. Like it wasn't, well, I mean, it wasn't Sirius or Jupiter or anything like that. It was like some new phenomenon and it wasn't shifting, so it wasn't a plane. And so I thought it was some sort of supernova. And when I got underneath it, it was still that bright. That's what let me see the shape and the color and the outline of this thing. It was because it was emanating so much light and radiating and illuminating the surface. It was like this dark gray color. So without that light, it would have been totally invisible because it was dark out. It was like, midnight.
So did your dad see it? Did you have any other witnesses?
That's what I talked to my mom right after because then I kept driving and then she called me back and I talked to her and she was asking some of these questions and she asked, did anyone on the highway slow down? And it seemed that everyone kind of slowed down a little bit, but it was pretty empty. But my dad never got outside. He was up in Sonoma. So, I mean, he's like, dozens and dozens of miles away. So he wouldn't have seen it because it was just local to there. I did some searches online, like UFO in Oakland, UFO Bay Area, like set the time to be the past 24 hours. I didn't see any news stories on this. I, in general, also think a lot of people are kind of clueless or not visually, like, that observant. And so I think a lot of people are just driving, they're listening to something or whatever, and they're just kind of in a go mode and they think it's something else. But in general, it seemed people did slow down. I mean, I slowed all the way down to like 50 or something like that. And I was like, I was actually like looking up like this as best I could when I was right underneath it through the driver window, like trying to see this thing. And that's when I saw that shape and the red lights and the dark gray. And then when I kept going, I started looking in the mirrors. But right in that area of the bay, there's some hills and the highway started to turn. So then all of a sudden I kind of lost it. I didn't see it anymore after that. It was really only when I was approaching it for about 10, 12 minutes that I saw this thing.
So it was definitely directional. In other words, that light was a direction. And once you got past that light, you couldn't see it anymore. Like an engine, like the engine on the back of a spaceship, right?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. I didn't think of that. Yeah, the highway also started to turn and twist and there were some hills there. So, and also your view back is always going to be worse than your view forward because you have the big windshield. But
Yep.
I may have seen like some glimpses of it right afterwards, but within like a minute it was gone. And then I was actually on the bridge pretty quickly. There's another bridge that crosses over, like Calaveras Bridge, I believe it is.
Yep.
And then at that point it was gone. I didn't see it, but it was it was like this. I'll try to sketch it. It was have you ever seen anything like that? Have you ever seen a sort of what's your
The only thing
experience?
I've seen is dancing lights. Like it wasn't Starlink. I've seen that. That's a series of lines, right?
Yeah.
But I've seen like what appears like stars bouncing around in unusual patterns, kind of like dancing. But again, it's like hard to say that was. I was confident enough to say that was a UFO. It was more like it wasn't my imagination, right? But it was clearly like could have been a phenomenon of what we call atmospheric light distortion. So an upper atmospheric disturbance that made them look like they were moving, but it was really an optical illusion based on my position, my fixed position, and the amount of energy between me and what was I seeing. And I've had another friend who actually filmed dots like that over his head, and he did it like, I don't know, 15 nights in a row. He was seeing this phenomenon, and he's in Oregon. He's up in Bend, Oregon.
Okay.
And he has very little light pollution. Where I am
Yeah,
here
it's
in
nice there.
Baltimore, we have tons of light pollution. So
Hmm.
again, that's why I didn't like get too excited about what I saw, because again, it could have been very easily an upper atmospheric disturbance. Now, I've other friends who have had experience with little grays, and one who's actually seen what's called a skinwalker.
Really?
Yeah, skinwalkers are crazy. Like he said that he was so scared, like you, all the hair went up on his body, and he couldn't get the fuck out of there fast enough. And it's the same gentleman, and this was on an Indian reservation in, I want to say Arizona, but it might have been New Mexico. And he's a very spiritual guy, very much into the realms and the understanding of energy and power. And again, very, very intelligent man, not someone that's going to make up shit. But when he was on the reservation, he was staying with an elder, and the little gray came into the house and freaked the elder out to the point where he basically told him, "You got to get out of here, man. Like now, like go." And that was shortly after that experience with the walker. So I have to believe that there was some tie. Cheeto, no chewing on the cords. I have to believe that there was some kind of connection between him experiencing the skinwalker, and then hours later, a little gray enters the house of where he was staying.
Oh, all in rapid sequence.
Yeah, within a night, within a short, few hours to say max. And so he ended up having to leave and was told not to come back anymore, because obviously he was a portal or a light or beacon for them to follow or connect to. And he hasn't had an experience like that since. But, again, very unique.
The other thing that I've been thinking of is I think like my buddy, he's one of the people on Mystery of Blind Frog Ranch, which is a show from History Channel. And in general, there's a lot of production that goes into those shows, but that's just a weird place in general. It's near Skinwalker Ranch, and I haven't been there, but I've been to Blind Frog Ranch, and so he sees lights and crafts all the time, and it seems to be that if you are a psychonaut and you start to play with some of these psychedelics, like specifically mushrooms, I think if you use them enough times, it starts to open up your ability to see into subtle energies or different dimensions. And I think some of these things are actually in other dimensions, or they may be more visible there. And so I've been doing some microdosing recently, but they're all microdoses. And I'm also someone that can take a microdose or a macrodose and still be sober if I want to. But I wasn't on any sort of microdose with like mushrooms or anything when that happened. And so like I feel like I was seeing our 3D reality, but I'm just one set of eyes. So I just want to make that like clarification and everything. But it was very odd. And it seems that I think like if you think of like some of the just I guess logistics of it or whatever, like now that there's been more like UAP sightings and more like disclosure, even with, like in the Navy and everything, and people acknowledging that they're seeing weird things and building up this catalog and going through them and everything. If you do have access to this technology, it's going to be more and more commonplace. And then it's like you could start to fly around more often and people aren't going to be as like weirded out by it. Whereas let's say 1,000 years ago, when there's no planes or anything, and you're like, a UFO flies over Rome, people would be like, what the fuck is happening? Right? Because there are no planes. But I believe this technology is like, I kind of want to go into the some of the potential physics of how this works, if you'd like to go there really quick.
Yeah, hell yeah.
So if we look at the Earth, there's a kind of an interesting. Oh, and here's what this thing like looked like. Oh, I guess I have to turn off the green screen. Let me do that really quick. And yeah, we'll go right here. Okay, so here is what this thing looked like.
Wow.
It was like this cube, and imagine the actual color of that cube being a very dark gray, but it had that light coming out of it, and it was golden. So not this highlighter yellow, but like golden. And it honestly looked like some sort of like portal. Like from a distance, it was so bright. I was like, is this like a portal? And then I was thinking more the supernova route, because that just made more sense logically. But the purple that it had made it look almost like some energy portal. I mean, I'm just going through all the things in my head, right? But it looked like that. When I was underneath it looking up, I saw that cubic shape, and then the red lights were on the corners like this. And yeah, it was really, really wacky.
It sounds like it's Stargate.
I don't know, but I'm like reevaluating everything now. I mean, I just went to this party. I was gonna like, wake up and make my normal daily video, and now like my entire world has been rocked. I don't want to be like a UFO guy, right? That's not what I want to be known for. Like, oh, I'm just a UFO guy now. Like, no, but I had to share like what I've experienced, or at least I want to. I think that's important, to fully understand where we are in our reality, the truth of things. So I feel it's good to share my experience because I've established a certain level of trustworthiness and integrity with my YouTube channel and the information I present. And so if I can help just broaden our perception of the world and reality through my personal experience, relaying this as quickly as possible. Like this is just 14 hours ago.
Well, hopefully you've given other people courage to step up and perhaps reach out to you, whether they saw that or something similar or unique or weird. I mean, did you see the clips coming out of where the CERN experiment is? They showed these like crazy bolt of lightning or not lightning, of light, and then what looked like a portal opening up and something coming through the portal, and then it went away. Have you seen those clips?
No. Is this near Geneva?
Yeah, it was like days ago, just a couple days ago. So
Maybe,
it could have been your orb that came through because you could see a black object coming through the friggin' opening before it closed, but you couldn't make out.
Maybe Ken can pull that up because that's crazy. And we saw a big sequence of UAP disclosures when Pluto moved into Aquarius. And that was like literally right on the dot for when it first moved into that degree. And based on my study, there seems to be something with astrology that works. And so now we're going to have a longer transit, and then it's going to be fully there. And I don't know, this is all kind of lining up with these things. Somehow it seems to work in regards to bringing certain things to the forefront with these astrological transits. But
let's face it, they're energy, right? That's the whole point behind you start stacking up stars, you're going to create different kinds of pulls, therefore energy, forces, or sources. So it only makes sense that astrology does provide, whether it's a look into the future, you should do this or focus on this month or that month. But I can also see how it would, definitely provide another form of energy in an excess that's not normally there on a constant basis that could potentially open these portals or provide, like you said, I think you hit the nail on the head. Those people that are aware, who maybe don't focus on their ability to see auras or energy or feel things, like everybody knows what it's like when the hair goes up on your body, whether it's someone told you a story or what. But that's an energy source that's creating that hair to stand up. Mm-hmm. And whether it's psychedelics or meditation or spirituality, whatever it is, yeah, you're going to see more than people that are, I don't want to say dull, because I don't think that's appropriate. Less aware or less connected.
Yeah,
connect.
there's different levels of tuning. Some people are
Yeah,
more tuned to
tuning.
3D, some people are more tuned to
Tune.
4, 5, 6, whatever.
That's a better way to say in tune or out of tune.
Yeah. I think the entire planet seems to be tuning more this direction. So I'll share some of the other experiences. So I'll skip around in time. Back in not June, sorry, September of 2023, I was in the Carpathians in Ukraine because I spent nearly 3 months in Ukraine. And there, the skies are really clear because there's so little light pollution. So it was amazing being able to look up. You see the entire Milky Way. I actually took some time lapses and I captured one of these things in my time lapses. But there's a lot of times, like multiple times, that I was stargazing, and you know what a satellite is. You see it's a
Oh yeah.
small light. It's a small light, and it travels across, and it doesn't really change in its brightness unless it catches the sun. But if it's like late at night, like not sunset or sunrise, it's not going to catch the sun because it's so close to the Earth. It's up in the ionosphere. It's not uh, 30,000 kilometers up. It's actually pretty close to the Earth. So
Yep.
it's not going to catch the sun unless it's near sunrise or sunset because it's going to be totally on the dark side. So, but it still has just a little light that it has, and you can track it across, and it's very dim and whatever. But there was these multiple times where I saw just there's this darkness, right? The normal sky picture, and then this light flashes on. Not this bright by any means, but as bright as a normal star, like a pretty big, pretty significant star. And then it would actually pulse and reach a crescendo, and then it would go all the way to dark again. And there was even one time where one or two times where the color was green, so it wasn't like yellow or white. It was actually like a green light. And my thought process is that a satellite wouldn't want to waste energy on producing that much light. Like to do some sort of pulse like that is pretty energy intensive to see it from the surface. Why would it want to waste that energy? And why would it pulse and then go dim? Why wouldn't it just have its light on like they do just a little bit? Right? So it's like this weird pulse. And one of the times I caught this was actually I was doing some time lapses of the Milky Way, 30-second exposures. And so there's this I did 5 of them to try to get the focus and everything. And on the third one in the set, I caught that light and it showed up. And you can look at the exposures. Like maybe I'll pull it up later. You
Yeah.
can look at the exposures and see the light go from on to off. And it was really crazy. And so that was unexplained. And the thing that's significant about that is that it was in Ukraine. The reason why it's significant is that airspace is closed off in Ukraine. So you have Ukrainian fighter jets or planes, whatever. You have Russian jets, but we're on the western side. But it's a closed off airspace. So there was almost the only time I heard a plane was once when they conducted a series of strikes across western Ukraine. I heard one fighter jet. That's the only time I ever heard any sort of plane in Ukraine, whereas typically in the Bay Area, they're flying over all the time. You hear them, or SoCal, or wherever, right? East Coast, anywhere. But there is always quiet. There's nothing flying through the air. And you see the satellites, normal satellites, and then there's this pulsing light. And I don't know what that was, but that was weird. So I saw that. And the other thing that happened a couple days ago, before this UFO incident, a couple days ago, at around 3:28 a.m. in Napa in the morning, I woke up because I checked my phone 5 minutes after it happened. So it was like 3:28. And there was this sound that was extremely loud, like super loud, that was approaching the house. And we're on a street where we get some traffic, and there's often people that zoom down the street faster than they should. Like the speed limit, I think, is like 25, but some people go 60, right? Some of these people out really aren't considerate. They just zoom by, and maybe they have like a muscle car, or like a truck or something, so it's kind of loud. And growing up in this house, I've experienced all that. I've seen how it's gotten busier, and I've experienced all the different variations of cars and everything. This was like a whole new level of decibel volume. It was like significantly louder than any single car that's ever driven by. And actually this morning there was two cars that drove by that were very loud. One was like a sports car, and one was a truck, just based on the sound of it. And those were quite loud, and those still pale in comparison to what happened a couple nights ago. So there was a sound that was approaching, and then it was so loud, and then the speed that it went by, just based on my estimates, must have been like 120 or like 150 miles per hour. Like super fast. And it also didn't seem to be like, it didn't necessarily have to be at the direction of the street that I live on. Like, a car has to be on the street, but if something's flying, it can be at any direction. And it seemed to be higher than the street too. Like, I can hear them being below me, the cars. This seemed to be just like elevated to some degree. And the house was creaking after it went by, because it zoomed by, and then the house is creaking afterwards and made all these noises. And when cars drive down the street, you can hear the tires on the asphalt. That's part of that sound signature. Like, they have the engine, there's the wind brushing by, but you also hear the actual tires hitting the asphalt, part of the signature. And this didn't have that. It was just like a going by, and just whoosh by the house. And the last thing that's relevant is that the main street that we're connected to is just like maybe a block away from my house. So for someone to turn onto that street, it's impossible to accelerate to 120 or 150 miles per hour. Nor would you want to, because there's an oak tree in the middle of the road. So the street takes like a bend like this. And at 60 or 70 or 80 miles per hour, if you're a real speed freak, you could do that. But at 120, I mean, that'd be like suicide to try to go around that oak tree with the island and everything. And so the only way for someone to get that speed is if they ran through the main street, the perpendicular main street. If they just ran through it, either red light or they happen to get green, and they would have had to start further back. So we've also had to like go through stop signs. And why would they do that drag on that street? It doesn't make any sense to me. I've never before experienced something happening that fast and that loud. Like, it was a whole new level of, like, you know, someone speeding down the street. And so that happened just I think 3 nights ago now. So it happened in advance of this UFO sighting. So I don't know what's been happening, man, but it's been crazy.
Well, it sounds like you're in a hotbed up there.
I don't know what's happening, but there's some weird stuff.
It almost sounds like, remember the little pre-vehicles in, what was that, Close Encounters? The ones that went through the toll booth, and Close Encounters of the fourth kind or third kind.
Okay.
You never saw that movie?
There's a lot I haven't seen.
But, well, they had a couple of, I don't know, explorer vehicles or whatever that came through first before the aliens actually landed at the mountain. But again, those were these, you know, they were traveling at incredible speeds. You know, it was a movie, obviously, but they used noise as a way to kind of emphasize the speed at which the vehicles were traveling. Because let's face it, you're not going to run something through the atmosphere. There's too much friction for it to be noiseless. You're going to have some kind of reverberation as a result of the air splitting and then collapsing behind it. I don't know. I'm throwing darts at the wall here, my friend.
Yeah, it was weird. That's why I wanted to talk about this here. I know we had a kind of like our normal, maybe not normal, but, you know, talking.
Yeah, nothing normal about this channel.
What can I say? Okay, we're everywhere.
Yeah, it's great. But yeah, so those happen. I guess the last thing to, like, based on my live stream, I said disclosing my UAP and alien encounters. The other thing, I mentioned this once on my channel, but the other thing that I could disclose, just to give this the entire roundup for anyone watching, was the most terrifying, scariest dream that I ever had was when I was a kid. And it's a fairly short dream. And I was like maybe like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, somewhere in that range, pre-puberty, but also not so young where like I don't know what the world is, right? Like there was a little bit of a sense of maybe I was like 9 or 10 or something. And so I had this dream where in my mom's room, she has a skylight over her bathroom sink. So there's like it goes up quite a bit. It's like a cutout cylinder, right? Or yeah, like channel, and then there's a skylight maybe 15 feet up or something. And so the dream was that these gray creatures, these grays broke through the skylight and streamed down, and then basically they like grabbed us, and that was it. It just went totally dark after that. So there was this, I had just had this dream. I just woke up with this dream of them coming down through the skylight, and that was it. And that's when I mentioned this on my channel maybe like a month ago or a month and a half ago recently. Some people thought like, are you sure that's a dream? And I don't know. I mean, that was a dream. It's been a dream, right? I don't want to reform my memory for it to be something that it wasn't. But I woke up and that was a dream that I had of like these these grays, I guess you would call them, breaking through the skylight. And I'm not someone to like watch like horror movies or like alien movies or something. It's not like I haven't seen any, but it's not like there was anything that triggered that I remember. It's not like we watched that, Independence Day, like, that night, and then I had that dream. It was just totally out of the blue, and it just freaked the crap out of me. And that actually kind of instilled in me like this like fear of like just that whole kind of aspect, that archetype, right? Um, and so yeah, some people, not a dream. I don't know, but that's just like my full disclosure now. All the things I've experienced.
Did you ever have a reoccurring one?
No, it wasn't reoccurring. It was a one-off. So yeah, that's the thing. If it was like a recurring, then that would seem to be more so like this like latent fear that the body is bringing up for processing. But it was a total one-off. I've had recurring dreams before. The most like for me it was like being chased, but that was a while ago, and that didn't happen that often. But that was just like a super vivid, powerful, intense one-off. And it's very limited because it's coming through the skylight. And then I'm not even sure it was like an actual grabbing or anything of that nature. But it was just like an infiltration. And then boom, that's it. That was all that's remembered or experienced in that dream.
So the reason I ask about whether it was reoccurring, because if it was reoccurring, it would completely verify that it was a dream.
Yeah.
Whereas a one-off, it could have been a momentary glitch in the friggin' dimension that allowed you to be exposed to either something in the future or something in the past. Who knows? Again, these are all really unexplored territories, but quantum mechanics is clearly defining at least 4, if not 11, other dimensions that are connected. And this gets deep down the rabbit hole, but again, it all comes back to energy, vibration, sound, and light. So cool story though, dude. Really fucking cool, or experience, I should say.
Yeah. So that's exactly like I'm looking at this also from that perspective of like, was this me, just my senses tuning into a different dimension? And that's why maybe other people didn't see it or experience it. But I mean, I've experimented with enough mind altering drugs. So none of the crazy ones. I haven't done like DMT or LSD or anything. Like it's just been weed and mushrooms. So I've, on like mushrooms, for example, the science is really interesting. It reduces your default mode network and your central executive system. And some recent research I read is that your visual perception is based on your alpha wave, which is that 8 to 12 hertz wave. And so when your alpha wave is pulsing really strongly, it allows for you to make more distinct like snapshots, which gives you then your kind of your frame rate. So then you can see things at a high frame rate, high resolution. But when you take magic mushrooms, for example, it decreases your alpha wave and your beta wave and your gamma wave power, slightly increases your theta and your delta, which is at 0 to 8 hertz range. And so things become more smoothed out. There's less of a high frame rate. So that's why things start to look different, is that your actual visual acuity decreases because your alpha decreases. And so, for example, like there was once in Washington, I took maybe like 4 grams of mushrooms over the course of some hours. We're in the forest, and I saw like this shimmering like wall of energy between the trees. It's like a really magical area. It was Lake Angeles up in the Olympics. And I think what the mushrooms do is they lower that normal frame rate. So you start to see things moving at that different frequency because you're not resolving at the same cadence. So now you see some of these other vibrations that things like normally have. But I wasn't high on mushrooms when I'm driving on the highway. I mean, it was, and then this was like a clear, like here's a cube with like flashing red lights on the corners that are pretty dim, but they were flashing then with this big central engine. So let me talk about the what I think it may have been actually. If you like to hear that.
Yeah. Was there
Yeah,
any
please.
noise? Was there any noise associated to this light, or was it just quiet?
Oh yeah, I didn't hear a thing. I was doing a language lesson in my car. I paused it pretty quickly, and I was talking to my dad as I drove underneath it, but I didn't hear a thing. There was no noise associated with it. But what's interesting in learning about the Earth is that you start to get a different sense of gravity when you look at the planet. So like the core has like the densest materials, right? You know, all the metals, and you know, there's probably a highly enriched amount of uranium in the core because it's so dense. Of course, gravity is going to pull it down. It's going to be what's pulling that thing down. And then as you get up, the crust, the siliceous crust, you know, is a lower density than the mantle, and then you get to the air and water. Water is lower density than rock. And then you get air, it's extremely low density compared to rock. And then as you move into the atmosphere, the density of the air decreases and the energetics increases. So every particle in the atmosphere becomes more energetic, and therefore it wants to spread out more, and it's able to resist the force of gravity to a greater degree. And then you go up to the ionosphere. Now it's a lightly ionized plasma. There's some regular molecules. There's some actual ions up there, so plasma. And so they're bouncing around more so, and that's higher away from the gravitational field of the Earth. And then you go to the radiation belts at 2 Earth radii all the way to 9 Earth radii, and those are even more vibrational. They have higher energies. The density goes down further. And then you go into the magnetotail of the Earth, which stretches out, and they have the highest energies of all the different ion populations in the plastosphere, because they have the greatest vibrational strength to them, but they also have the lowest density. So there seems to be this factor at play with gravity that your ability to resist the force of gravity is based on the energetics of that thing. So the more energetic something is, the more it just naturally finds a different place in the gravitational field. And so if you look at the phenomenon of like ball lightning, have you heard of ball lightning?
Yep.
Yeah. So if you look into ball lightning, and they have like photos of this now, like just a few years ago, it was still kind of sketchy. They had a lot of historical accounts, but now you can actually find some pretty good photos of ball lightning online, and they're crazy. And basically what ball lightning is like some sort of like plasma orb which somehow gets created during some sort of atmospheric phenomenon. Basically just like some of the atmosphere, you know, down here at the surface, the atmosphere is incredibly dense. You know, we have these molecules everywhere. So if you're able to ionize those, then you have a high density plasma. Up in the ionosphere, the density is way lower than at the surface. So if you could ionize some of the atmosphere here at the surface is very high density plasma. And these reports of ball lightning is that these things are just floating around. They're totally resisting the force of gravity, and they're kind of zooming, and they even have, it seems like, intelligence. Like there was a report with the king of, like, the Tsar of Russia, where it flew through the church and stopped in front of him and then zoomed around him. Like, take that for what it's worth. But they seem to have like some level of like consciousness. I mean, you could look at general resonance theory that states that everything that is vibrating has some iota of consciousness. And but they seem to, because of their vibrational intensity, to resist the force of gravity. So my thought when I saw that cube, this UFO UAP, is that if you were able to generate a plasma reactor and then attach some sort of structure to it, whether you have like fixed magnetic field lines, and then your structure is built into that, or it's based on like you have a superconductor, so the plasma ions and the magnetic fields become locked together, superconductor properties, then you can build this craft around the plasma engine, and the plasma engine will defy gravity like we experience it typically, on the surface and everything, because it's so vibrational. It will find its own new gravitational zone that it wants to sit in because it's so vibrational. So this seemed almost to me, because I had that strong center light, like beyond strong, right? This is like 10 miles out. I'm seeing that effectively, that there's some sort of structure built around this like plasma engine, and it just has a way to lock to that plasma, whether it's like through superconducting properties or like fixed magnetic field lines. I'm not exactly sure how. And then it was just hovering. It was just hovering over the highway, like 300, 500 feet up.
Wow,
So maybe it's like an experiment. Like maybe it's like some sort of experiment. Someone just launched this thing and all of a sudden it's just like floating, or like, I don't know what. It was very weird. It didn't all of a sudden like accelerate and like move really quickly or anything. It was hovering for me. The entire time it was hovering in that position, it seemed, or moving very slowly.
So another phenomenon is, generally speaking, like ball lightning is usually blue, right?
Mm-hmm.
What you saw was, you described it as more purple, correct?
Golden with some purple though. Yeah.
Right. So that purple could very well, indicate a slight variation of blue. In other words, a little bit of red got involved. Whether that was the corners that were red flashing lights that were throwing or masking the blue into what more appeared to be more of a purple color.
Mm-hmm.
But
Possibly,
there's
yeah.
a lot to be said about blue light. There's this book that kind of went to some places that are almost unbelievable, or they're very much unbelievable to people who are not in tune. I'm gonna remember that word, in tune. It's called The Singing Cedars, or Anastasia and the Singing Cedars.
Oh, it's
I've
part of
talked about,
the Anastasia series?
yes, right.
Okay.
And she will talk about how these cedar trees start vibrating and blowing off this blue light, and that means they're ready to harvest. In other words, they've collected all of the energy from the universe, and they're at a point where they're ready to give it back to humans or creatures on the planet.
Yeah, I'm hoping to read that in Russian because I've been practicing, but I'm probably close to that level. But I mean, it's such a difficult language. Oh my lord.
Well, yeah, and the thing about it is, if you read it in Russian, you would know that you didn't get misinterpreted or components.
Yeah, exactly. So that'll be soon.
Nice.
It's interesting to hear that from the book.
Yeah, and so ironically, when back in, I think it was about 2005 or 2006, I was working on a project, a very, very fast-paced project for a billionaire on Martha's Vineyard, and I was basically working double shifts every day, 7 days a week.
Oh wow.
So basically at night, I would cut and set up the benches for all these different fancy pieces of stone, line up the templates on it, set the tape for the guys. So in the morning, I could come into the shop when they get in, and I'd go over, okay, you're on this piece, you're on this piece. You know, let's go through what the instructions are to make sure that there's no mistakes. These were all extremely expensive exotic stones, some of which could not have been replaced if a mistake was made. So you talk about pressure, right? It was a well into $750,000 job. And this one night, you know, I had been doing this for 6 months at least, 7 days a week. You know, 3 days I lived on the island, 4 days I lived on the mainland. And the 4 days I was on the mainland, I would be cutting all of the templates that I brought back after installing the last round of stone to prepare for the following week's installation and picking up the new templates. And I was burnt. I mean, 6+ months of just 7 days a week straight, 2 shifts, 16 hours a day, barely 8 hours of sleep a night. Of course, I wasn't eating well and, beat the fuck up. Well, this one night, I just lost it. I was frustrated. I was a spiritual guy, still am, always will be. It was raining. I walked out of my shop doors, got on my hands and knees, and just started screaming. What the fuck do you want from me, God? This is fucking bullshit. I'm done. I'm tired. I can't fucking take this shit anymore. And I'm screaming at the top of my lungs. The loudest sound I ever heard. Boom. And a flash of blue light that was blinding. That's all I remember. I find myself standing in the shop, soaking wet, standing, not on my knees anymore. How the fuck did I get from there into the shop, right? From that point on, all of my thought patterns changed. Like, I started looking at things differently. I started thinking about things differently. It created a rift in my marriage because I was like, not all about the money anymore. I didn't care about possession. I was transcended into another person as a result of that. I got rewired. And think about it. You get bolted with fucking currency. You potential to rewire all your neurons. I truly believe that's what happened. But it wasn't for probably until 2012 or 13 when I was reading that book, The Ringing Cedars, that she started talking about the blue light. And I'm like, holy fuck. That was an energy beam. That was not a bolt of lightning. That was an energy. Now, could have been lightning, sure. That could have been the vehicle that transferred that energy. Highly possible. But the fact that it was blue, the fact that it was blinding, and the fact that she describes intensely about how universal energy is in that color range, it made me start to really think more about, like, wow, was that an what do I call it, a UFO experience? Was that an energy transfer? What the fuck was that, right? And I didn't have any burns on me. I didn't have any like physical proof that this happened to me, other than my stating it, because I'm an honest guy. I don't lie. I don't believe in lying. And personally, I'm not about fortune or fame. I don't give a shit about any of that stuff. I just experienced that, and I know from that point forward, it definitely changed the way I looked at everything. I started digging down the rabbit hole of, well, what is money? Like, I just gotten 3 years later, I got fucked out of, my whole life savings. I had 2 big fancy houses, all the work. I'd worked for almost a year plus out in front of me. Then the crash happened in 2007, and I had no work. For the first time in my life, I had no work. And that's when my wife divorced me, threw me out of the house, took my kids away from me, maxed out my credit cards, stole all the money out of the business, and started bad mouthing my clients. So even if I had good clients, I lost them due to her telling them, horrific lies about who I was. And so there was very much a forced change in my life as a result of that bolt, and then the consequences of 2007 that forced me to really start looking at everything, like history. Well, now I truly understand history is a set of lies agreed upon by the conqueror, right? All history is rewritten by the victor. Money is paper. It's printed by a group of banking cartels that originated in Europe under the Rothschilds and evolved over here into the U.S. and established itself after Jekyll Island, and I think it was the 20s or 30s.
Yeah.
But again, all of a sudden you start to realize, well, wait a minute, the Federal Reserve isn't part of the government. Yeah, well, why? What? I'm a slave due to taxes.
Wait, what?
Right? How is this? How does this work? And they can print as much as they want. And I'm killing myself to earn these pieces of paper that really have no value because they can just print more of them. And so it definitely shot me down a rabbit hole of beyond inquisitive. Like I wanted to know now. I want to know the truth behind all this bullshit. And that's how I ended up where I am, to this day, was that I decided after about 2008 that I did not want to go back to money making. Like I knew I needed to make money to survive, right? Money's a tool. We need it to survive, but we don't need to accumulate it. We don't need to make more than what we need. And that's the biggest problem with humans, is that they've been programmed to believe that what they want is what they need, not what they need is what they, right?
And also to do it at the expense of others at times, which is just some of the capitalistic programming.
And
crony capitalistic, I should say.
So anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go on that tangent, but I wanted to reel it back into blue light. And again, Ken, if you could find pictures of lightning balls, they'll generally be in a color blue. And sometimes they're often related to volcanic activity. So over the top of a volcano, you'll see these orbs that are just shooting lightning bolts off in all directions.
Yeah, there's a few interesting realizations I've come to just in the past few days. I'm glad you shared that story. That sounded like some sort of spiritual, and that one on the top left there is the one that's really came out recently. But yeah, look at that. But then it looks like there's plenty others now too. That's just a Google search as well.
And look at that blue one. Look at those. Generally speaking, and again, you've got to remember the filter of the light. If the sky around it is a different color, then the lightning ball will be a different color.
Yeah. And that's the thing. So that's the interesting thing about my recent experience with seeing whatever this thing was, is that I've now embarked upon really understanding atmospheric science and space weather phenomenon. So that's why I thought it was a supernova, right? Because I know what that looks like and everything based on historical records. And, they do happen every 100 years in our galaxy. That's the frequency rate. Doesn't, of course, mean that's going to be the frequency, but then I know it's not like a sprite or an elf. And we've had fair weather conditions. It's totally nice weather here in the Bay. So there's like almost no clouds out. That day there was just like clear skies, fair weather conditions. So it wasn't some sort of like atmospheric phenomenon. And of course I then drove under it and saw like whatever it was.
You verified that it wasn't an atmospheric disturbance.
But there's I'm starting to realize now that we've learned, science is interesting how like once we start to learn a little bit, you can start to see other modes of like how things evolve. So for example, how's Poe doing? Poe's doing well?
He's doing good. He's doing so much better that now that he has his little buddy that he can turn around. And they're actually playing very well right now. I did not expect to have this much silence with these two knuckleheads. No, you're such a good boy.
So before we go too much further, guys, there's a couple of questions that people really wanted to point out. Did you experience fear, and what did you feel from it?
And that would have been during the gray, your dream. That comment came right after your dream.
Yeah, a lot of it was more based on the original experience, right? When you drove under that object, what did you feel from that?
Oh, was it
the first one? That was the first one.
Yeah. Okay. Well, under the object, not so much fear, but definitely like I don't know what this is, what it's doing, though it doesn't seem to be doing anything like nefarious, but it was just so bizarre. And when I drove under, and then once I saw it, and once I saw it was like some actual thing, and not just a light, but a thing, you know, I saw the shape, then every hair on my body stood up, right? And so I don't think it was like, you know, broadcasting some sort of energy field to make me feel that. I think that was my system being on complete full alert. Like we're like adrenaline, like we're going to kick everything up. So you are maximally aware and protected and observant and everything. So I think every hair stood up on my body because of that. But there's also just throughout my life, anytime sometimes some of these things get brought up, you know, you get like those tingles or the hair on the back of your neck stands up. Like there is that aspect when you start to sometimes think of some of these things in dimensions and energies and whatever, like entities or whatever. And so it was similar to that, but I think it was really just my body just like trying to sense its environment to the maximum. But it wasn't necessarily fear. It was just sheer amazement and awe and wonder. But the dream definitely had a fear connotation. I was young, so that'd be fearful for I think almost anyone if they're young to have, like some sort of like abduction dream. And sometimes I get goosebumps when thinking about that dream. The more I talk about it though and process it, the more it just becomes like accepted, right? And not some fearful thing anymore. But yeah.
And what was the other question, Ken?
They were both on, you know, what did he feel? Like, was there fear when he said it? Like, Stefan, you talked on your last show about laying in the area where there was only the one cell tower, no other Wi-Fi available, and you could hear that. Did you get any hearing, or did you hear anything or feel anything from the object?
No, there wasn't anything like that. Now that I'm back home, you know, there's of course I turn the Wi-Fi off at night here, but there's so many other houses that I like. I mean, I can hear the ringing right now. I can hear all those different networks. But yeah, when I was in Ukraine in the tent in the mountains, there was only one signal I was hearing from that one cell tower on the hill. But I didn't hear any sort of frequencies like that. I seemed to have some ability to hear frequencies for whatever reason. But I didn't hear any frequencies. It was all a visual phenomenon. Seeing the light for about 10-12 miles as I was driving up the highway, then seeing the actual thing from underneath for a good like maybe 5-10 seconds as best as I could. Yeah. And actually at times from a distance it did look like it was some sort of plasma thing. I think I can be fairly confident with saying some sort of plasma thing. To have a lot of sleep after the experience. I slept in today. I did wake up at sunrise. I got to sleep late, of course, and then I decided to go back to sleep. So I didn't have a significant more amount of sleep, but I was kind of wired afterwards. So
You think?
yeah. The one thing
Now, was that on the way home from the party or on the way to the party?
Oh.
back from the party. Yeah. Not to the party. That was coming back from the party. And I already crossed the Bay Bridge. And I guess so that my mom did a Google search while I was still driving on some of this stuff, and she said that there's been a whole bunch of sightings from like 2021, 2023 of things over the Bay Bridge, which is nearby. So, you know, of course, I'm not the first person ever to see anything, but I guess other people just in the past few years have been seeing stuff in the Bay Area. And I need to go read those like reports and everything. And I'm honestly surprised I haven't seen any sort of reports of this yet. I didn't lose any time. I was on the call. It was all very normal. Reality did not change in any way except just seeing this thing. Everything was totally normal.
Stefan, you're getting a reflection that's hanging on your chin.
Yeah. I could adjust that. I would have to step off the camera for a second, though.
Yeah, I think it's annoying me, so it must be annoying other people too.
It's annoying me.
Well, hey, that was quick. Like that light beam on me last time we were on the phone.
Yeah.
True, right? You guys are two peas in a pod with light shining on you.
And speaking of which, I'll go close mine so it doesn't happen.
Okay. And just to let Stefan's crew know, we're live streaming to both. It's all about the biology channel, which there is another interview with Leighton and Stefan on our channel. We're mainly about living soils, cannabis, plant medicine, the energy, of course, etc. So you guys that are here with Stefan's channel, thank you. You guys are amazing. I'm trying to bring up a lot of your comments. Thank you for being here and participating today.
Seems to have
Thanks,
fixed
man.
it.
There you go. Now you're cleaned up.
Yep. The other interesting thing to think about too. So at this party, I met a pretty renowned astrologer. He has a app called Astrograph. His name is Henry, and I didn't hear this until just recently because there's so many people in this field. But he's been doing this for a while, and we started talking about trans-Newtonian objects. And for example, Eris, Eris, Eris is larger than Pluto. So it's a dwarf planet in the Kuiper belt that's larger than Pluto. And so what I started thinking about, and they're discovering all these. So it's not just Pluto now and its moons. There's a whole bunch of trans-Newtonian dwarf planets, gravitationally rounded, that are showing up in our solar system. And so they start to get these ecliptic orbits. And what I've been thinking of is that, our sun is traveling through the galaxy, and perhaps interstellar space is actually just loaded with these things. Like maybe there's just so many relic dwarf planets and objects and asteroids and things that just exist in interstellar space outside the gravitational capture of stars. And then as our sun is moving through interstellar space, we encounter this cloud of these things, and then some of them start to interact with our system. So I was thinking about the planet, like we have our moon, right? And I was thinking about like we have these space weather impacts, and for example, during a space weather flare, it hits our planet and it actually causes the ionization of oxygen, which is a critical component to water, a very critical part of our atmosphere. And it charges oxygen up and it moves into the ring current that circles our planet. There's a current of ions, like the radiation belts, that circles our planet. It's actually what depresses the magnetic field strength near the equator because it's counter to the Earth's static magnetic field. It induces this magnetic field that reduces it. That's why the equator has a magnetic field strength less than the poles. That's one reason. And so what they see during very strong geomagnetic storms is that oxygen ions from the upper atmosphere move into the ring current, become ionized, contribute significantly to that electric current, and then some of them escape. So the whole point of me saying this is that there are methods for things in Earth's atmosphere, critical components like oxygen, to escape out of the atmosphere. And we see that happening with the geomagnetic storm. This is not a 500-year process. That's like a 2-day process where we see, significant amount of ions leave. So our planet needs to be renewed with resources. And so like, if you have these trans-Newtonian objects or things, I could see at times like the Earth wanting to capture one of these and having an impact. And so you can look at like the Ring of Fire. Like we have this massive subduction zone with the Pacific, right? And this is just a hypothesis. This is very loose, but this is just an idea. Like what initially drove plate tectonics, right? Like why do we have plate tectonics? Like 70 years ago, they didn't believe in plate tectonics. So like the plates are moving, like there's plates, like they didn't even know about that. They had to take fossil records and find them. They see the same fossils in South America as in like Africa, and all of a sudden, okay, there's something here. But like what started plate tectonics? We have like convection of the mantle and these convective dynamics that like create that movement and flow of energy. But you could imagine some large dwarf planet, some like Kuiper Belt object, if it impacted the Earth and added its mass to the planet, it would sink into, it would impact, of course, it'd be a massive explosion. It would sink, though, into the mantle and drive that convective process. It would be this massive explosion ignition event. And then as it sunk into the mantle and accreted to the core, it would start that whole loop. And with things like, they look at Ceres, which is a dwarf planet in the asteroid belt, and they based on some like resonance, some spectral like resonance imagery and stuff, they think it's like 1/3 water. So how is like Earth being replenished with water and oxygen? We're losing it through space weather impacts. Like our oxygen ions during a geomagnetic storm are leaving our atmosphere, and some of them get blasted out the magnetotail into like interplanetary space. If that happens long enough, our oxygen is gone and then we die. So like there seems to be this need for renewal events. The Earth may, continuously get larger and larger, and perhaps it's like impacts of like trans-Newtonian or interstellar dwarf planets or things of that nature that keep the Earth sustaining. They happen on the geologic time scale, and then we may start to find evidence of this over time. But it just made me start thinking, like, you get some like erratic gravitational thing, boom, impact, and then you start to have some of these dynamics. So I've just been thinking very beyond the current limits of our scientific paradigm recently. And then I saw this UFO.
So it's interesting that you bring up plate tectonics. In one of my past careers as a stone cutter, I would often research where that piece of stone came from, so that I could better understand how to cut it, manipulate it, shape it, etc. And so obviously that leads right into geology. And as a person of interest who likes to really understand these scientific revelations, one of the things that came to me was, well, we all know that we started with a supercontinent, right?
Yeah.
Whatever you want to call it. And we know for a fact that it split, right? So my theory was that Earth was wobbling, and that wobble created the energy necessary to force equilibrium on the surface. So it had to break that stuff apart and centered in a way that that wobble became a rotation and not a wobble. And some of that comes to the conclusion, although we don't have this verifiable, but we now have 24 hours or 12 hours light, 12 hours of dark, or thereabouts, right?
Yeah.
So we had a more suitable system of light delivery for the explosion of plants. Now, yeah, there were plants on Gondwana. We know that for sure. But we know also that there was not the abundance of plants, as well as, obviously animals and mammals at that point in time either. So anyway, you go back to, okay, well, everything's split apart. So only makes sense that eventually it's going to come back together again, right? And that is the Ring of Fire. That is the Pacific Ring of Fire, because all of those plates are pushing and subducting and trying to drive together back into that supercontinent. And then you get into like water, right? Dude, I went down a rabbit hole hard during COVID about, all right, where did water come from? Right? How the fuck does this molecule that provides so much for life come from? And so I started looking at, well, can it form in space? Can it come from other places? And the answer is yes, comets. We know for sure comets are ice, right? And ice melts when it hits certain temperatures and turns into vapor or rain or water or a liquid. So, and there are examples of comets exploding in our atmosphere, and leveling forests, like the one in Russia. That was probably the most well understood comet explosion in our atmosphere, not upper atmosphere, but atmosphere, because it knocked trees over. But nothing. There was no There was not. It wasn't like an asteroid where you have a huge impact crater. All you had was where the impact was all the trees were laying in a circle. They'd blown down like a tornado hit and it just blew everything down. But again, no major impact crater. So that's why they hypothesized that it must have been a comet and not an asteroid.
Yeah,
and
exploded in the atmosphere. That's what they think.
Right. So that's why the trees blew all down in one circle, because wherever that explosion was created a thermal fusion of some kind.
Yeah.
And that burst knocked all the trees down in a circular form, and not, again, no impact rate. So, again, this goes back to panspermia. Like, well, where the fuck did water come from? Where the fuck did life come from? How did it get here? Well, it only makes common sense that it did come from a comet, and that was the first introduction to water. And more importantly, in our below the mantle or in the mantle, we are generating water. We know we're creating just through the plate tectonics, geological, biogeochemical interactions that are creating that molecule that is moving to the surface. Yeah. So in many ways, I think the Earth is like an arc that will probably continue to regenerate itself until the sun turns into a either a red giant and engulfs us all, or collapses on itself, one or the other. That the Earth will still be here until one of those, giant events occurs. At least in my understanding.
Yeah, and that's the idea, is that there's this frequency of occurrence, and so like for the sun, it has some genesis, it has some end as far as we think and know. Like that makes intuitive sense. I mean, that's kind of the cycle of life. But then there's some times where it has its solar cycles, and then it has like a flare, and then not a flare, which are different frequencies. So there's this very popular idea of like this solar flash, like this micronova, and they've been seeing micronova events from other stars that are significantly different than our sun. So to apply that research to our sun is a little misguided, but I do think there is probably some frequency of occurrence where the sun sends off really like super powerful flares or energy releases. The strongest flare that we recorded recently was back in 2003. They're known as the Halloween storms, and that was an X40 flare. And so what we had just back on the 31st and the 1st of this year was a X5 flare. So an X40 flare is nearly an order of magnitude greater. So extremely powerful. And then a Carrington event was very, very, very powerful. That was back in like 59 or 57 of 1857 to 59. But there seems to be this variation in frequency also with like our magnetic field. You have pole wandering, then you have excursions, then you have pole flips. You also just have temporal variations in magnetic field pulsations on the microsecond scale, like millisecond, second scale. Geomagnetic storms are variations, but at a day frequency, diurnal variations at a 24-hour frequency. So there's all these rhythms, and they all have different time periods to them. And so I think we see that with all things in life. We see that with the sun, and I think we see that also with the Earth and the things that it's taking in. So we have asteroids, little ones burning up all the time. And then sometimes we have these larger things like the explosion that you just referenced in Russia. And then at times, perhaps we're having dwarf planets impacting the planet and keeping the regenerative cycle going, feeding the planet with new material, new matter, new water. That's probably at a lower frequency than something like a large comet. And then the moon may have been that peak primary impact, the largest in scale, where you have two planets of similar sizes actually colliding. That's what they theorize with the formation of the moon. But I think sometimes, I think for you to have certain realizations, you have to actually go to those spaces, those liminal dimensions, and just place your consciousness there. And then all of a sudden, some things become kind of clear, especially if you've done some background research. And like, we're finding all these trans-Newtonian objects, and like, who's to say they're going to be with us for that long? They're going to be in our system. They'll be out of our system. Yeah, that's
Well,
better.
you also consider that the waveforms coming through our planet are actually affecting the, I want to say micronutrients, but the compounds in our planet and energizing those compounds, which are then drawn up by our plants as well.
Oh,
Yeah, it works at all levels.
Yeah, definitely.
You two are the experts at that.
And then you get into subatomic particles. Oh boy.
Which is fun. It's really cool once you start to learn some of that stuff, right? Like the quantum and then the atomic and but then also look at the big scale and see how similar they are. I mean,
They're
is so many
exactly
similarities.
the same.
Yeah.
They're the fucking same, dude.
Yeah.
You know, and you get into like, you know, the Fibonacci sequence and how the absolute micro is equal to the expansive macro, the biggest piece you can see, versus going all the way down to the atomic level, and it's the same fucking thing. It's you know, these tiny little particles circulating around a nucleus that is creating what looks like a universe.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you say, okay, well, what is an electron? Oh boy, fuck. Then you get into that quantum realm of, well, it's multiple particles, but they disappear and then they come back and they can be in two places at the same time. Whoa. 2 places at the same time.
Yeah. It gets really interesting. And that's why the current, I think it's changing pretty rapidly, it seems, but like the current scientific paradigm, I guess my issue that I have is that just some people are just so sure of everything. And I just wonder why they're so sure of it. Like, I mean, I have my beliefs, right? I'm very careful to call them beliefs. And a lot of them are backed by a lot of scientific evidence. And then also my personal experience. I put a lot of weight on what I personally experience. And I think we as developed, like, you know, fairly high vibrational consciousnesses, like we have an ability to observe things without influencing it to a great degree. Whereas, like, for example, an electron microscope, you're looking at some cell or some structure. Well, you're seeing it because you're blasting it with electrons. Of course, you're going to change what you're looking at because you're streaming it with an electric current. What you're seeing now is different than what it was before. Still useful, but you have to take that into account. But I think our consciousness is able to observe things without disturbing it. That's just a feeling that I have.
Yes, I agree 100%. And then you look at RNA, you can't. As soon as you look at it, boom, it's gone. Right? So to say that to observe is not to change is bullshit. You change just your presence, your energy, your life force in that environment has changed that environment. There are things that are aware that you're there that would not have done what they did if they were not aware that you were there. You know, and I want to circle back to something you said earlier about you know, these floating bodies, these dead stars or you know, whatever they are that are floating, and as our universe is flying through the friggin', you know, super galaxy, that why wouldn't it attract some of these other little microplanets or dead stars? I mean, it only makes sense that it would, that they would get caught in that gravitational pull at first, very, very slowly around the orbiting around the galaxy. But then as they continue to slow down, eventually they would penetrate that and move into the inner circle where, you know, you get into the planets and the asteroid belts and everything else. And if they'd ever really bumped into anything and changed their trajectory, then of course they would be absorbed into somebody's gravity. And I think that that's a beautiful way of looking at how we are starting to realize that in very many ways this universe is constantly being reseeded and receiving materials, water, minerals, you know, materials, building blocks, for lack of better word. So I think that was a a great way to just kind of like emphasize the fact that we are in every way in the same kind of successionary growth or evolution that we see on the micro here on the planet, but then in the macro in the universe itself.
Yeah, you occasionally have collisions at the atomic scale. Like an electron, when it's the free electron, very rarely it'll hit the nucleus. I mean, almost always it doesn't. It gets caught into an orbital. That's our best.
Someone else's orbit.
Yeah, that's our best framework, but it's not impossible for that particle to hit the actual nucleus and then trigger a change there. And so I think we just look at things. I think often people don't have the perception, like we need to expand our perception of probability and then also realize that our time frame that we've been examining this stuff is extremely limited. Like normal scientific paradigm is only operating from, let's say, like maybe the Renaissance to now, but really the past 120 years, I would say. It's like, okay, since we've had, telescopes, we can look at things of that nature. But really, when we're talking about the solar system, when we're talking about the planet, we have to think of geologic time. Like the planet's been here based on radiocarbon, like not radiocarbon, like radiometric dating of like potassium and other elements. Like the planet is approximately 4.55 billion years. And of course, that's not going to be exactly accurate, but it seems to be in this billion year zone. So a lot of things happen in 4.55 billion years. I mean, we're seeing crazy stuff happen just on the human time scale. And now just multiply those probabilities out. Like it's almost certain that the planet has had many large impacts with these sort of like dwarf planets than just a single one impact, like almost certainly. And how quickly can the Earth recover from that? And how quickly can that evidence be hidden to a large degree, like erased or disturbed? Like asteroids have iridium, but a dwarf, like I don't think you may get an iridium signature from a dwarf planet impact, for example, right? If it went through its whole like own geologic processes and refined itself, but then it went cold and dark because its star died out, and then it's in space for 3 billion years before we stumble upon it, and then it like impacts the Earth 300 million years ago. Like that's going to be some difficult evidence to tease out, I would think. I don't think that's going to be super obvious. You're going to have to look bigger, right? Like we see the Yucatan impact 65 million years ago. We see that crater. We see some of these others, but like a very big impact. I think you'd have to look at like, why do we have a subduction zone like this? That's where you'd have to look. Like the entire subduction basin, perhaps, is that impact crater, hypothetically.
Yep. And again, like you said, how are you going to draw evidence from that? You can't, because everything became, how do I say, melted together. It bonded together on an atomic level that would not leave you a clear evidence. Like if we got hit by like a white dwarf or something, yeah, we'd be gone, right? Because it's all metal. But when you take a planetoid where, yeah, there's an iron core that created the gravity and everything else, but still that's just going to melt right into our existing elements and not leave a signature, right? And let me ask you this, right? You say 4.55 billion we've existed, and other science says, well, we got about 4 point something billion left before the sun either, goes red dwarf or, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So bottom line is, and this gets really creepy, that if you look at 2012, the end of the Mayan calendar, there's a lot of different theories behind, what they were trying to project forward. Mm-hmm. And one of the most interesting things that I observed during that period of time was I used to play golf quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And I liked playing with white golf balls. And my partner at the time, she liked playing with yellow golf balls because she could find them easier. And so we were out playing golf on this one beautiful sunny day. And I hit my golf ball and I couldn't see the trajectory anymore. Wait, what the fuck's going on? Why can't I see the ball fly anymore? And then weeks later, I read an article that basically said, the sun stopped burning helium and started burning hydrogen. So the light went from a yellowish light to a more white light, a different spectrum. And that kind of was like, oh, that's why I can't see my fucking white golf ball anymore, because the sun is shining a white light. So therefore canceling the white that I was seeing with the more yellow light. And of course, her golf ball, you could see miles away, clear as the day is long, because it was yellow. So it was a clear visual in the sun. Now, have you read anything about the sun shifting? Because the sun hit its half life, right? It went from burning helium to now hydrogen. So it began the end cycle. That it hit the bell curve, and now it's starting to go down the other way. And if you look at the geological or geophysical, astronomical projections of the sun going out in 4.5 something billion years, it kind of makes sense, right? I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, the model for fusion of the sun is that it starts with hydrogen and then it shifts to hydrogen and helium and then it starts to build heavier. So it'd be the opposite of that. But
Okay.
in regards to the exact, that's what they, no one's been to the center of the sun. So,
Right.
but we have dropped atom bombs. But in regards to just I like that you brought up the sun and its light spectrum, because if you measure the light spectrum of the sun, its peak light frequency is actually blue light. So the reason why, the reason it doesn't show up as blue though is because blue light scatters in our atmosphere. But I was thinking about this. I was like, from space, the sun should look bluish and not white.
Okay. Have you ever sun gazed?
Yeah, I do some sun gazing every now and
All
then.
right. So at the end of the day or the first thing in the morning, if you stare at that sun, you will see a blue orb in the middle, or it could be a pulsating glob.
Okay.
I've done it. And that again goes back to that blue light phenomenon. And that only makes sense because maybe that's why our sky is blue, because it's grabbing all of that blue light. And that's why our planet looks blue from outside of space, because the blue light is hitting the ionosphere and making it look blue.
Yeah, it scatters everywhere. Basically, there's certain molecule resonances that take up that vibrational energy of light, that specific frequency. They absorb it easily, so then it scatters. But yeah, sun gazing is interesting. I just did some recently, but it wasn't sunrise, sunset. I'll do that next opportunity I get. I'm there. I'll see if I can see that blue. But like the sun has a very nice aura. The moon often casts an aura too. Like you can see those. But yeah, I think as we start to explore the solar system more and actually just get away from this little dot that we live on, we'll start to see things better, because like we think we know how the universe works and we think we know how the earth works and the sun works in our solar system, but all of our data is literally coming from a single point in space-time, effectively. Like the only other points that we have outside are really like Voyager 1 and 2, which have left the heliosphere now, and their equipment is pretty archaic, and a lot of it's gone offline, and a lot of it they've taken offline purposely to save energy, because it only will last so long. So they're prioritizing what like gets broadcasted back to Earth. But we look at things, and everything we're looking at is from a single dimension. And yeah, we rotate around, so we're now in a slightly different part of the solar system. We look at the same thing again. You have a very slight separation, but if something's 3 billion light years away, according to estimate, like it's effectively we're still looking at from a single point source. So I feel like our perception of just even the solar system and Earth and our sun will change significantly when we actually start to go to other parts of our solar system and look at it very specifically there. Like, what's the sun look like on Mars with the human eye? We have cameras. Yeah, we have cameras, but like, what does it look like with the human eye? So we'll find out all that, I guess, pretty soon with all these rocket experiments and stuff. But I really want, like, I think it's cool to look up and to try to learn and understand these things as best as possible. It just stokes this curiosity and this like sense of placement in the universe and our connection to cosmos and God. But I just really want people to understand, like, we have one Earth. This is like the one thing that we got. We need to treat this like this planet with respect and do what we can to make it a better place. For example, Dr. Bronner's. I'm sure you know Dr. Bronner's. I mean, some people think the guy's nuts. I guess I've never met him, but at this party we were talking about him because he makes chocolate bars now. It's called Magic Chocolate Bars, and it was on one of the phrases was the man or woman, like the person who plants 10 fruit trees in alignment with Earth and God and harmony and, you know, all these nice things, right? With love, respect, reaps like a million times that reward in heaven, right? And so he gave it very much as like an example of divine law. And so someone reading that, you know, sometimes people read the shampoo bottles or like on the toilet or something. It's like there that has all these weird things. I think people just read them. But if you actually think about that, like anyone could plant 10 fruit trees. Like anyone could go eat an apple and then plant the seeds. Find some hillside or some open land. Who cares about asking someone? Like, just plant the freaking seeds. I do that all the time. I was just on a hike recently, so the buckeyes were dropping seeds. And so there was also some groundhogs that had worked the soil and they were sprouting. These buckeyes had these big sprouts that come out, you know, the shell splits, and I planted them in the open dirt. I just scooped it up, and that whole hillside now in 20 years may be buckeye trees, more so than just them having hit and rolled a little bit, and they're now all too close together for exactly Johnny Appleseed. But it's this example of like, if we were all to do things like that, like I plant seeds all the time. And if we were all just to like plant 10 fruit trees, how different our planet would be. When I was driving down from Bend to California just recently, I saw this insane apple tree along the side of the highway. It's the only one I saw. But somehow, somewhere, someone, something, you know, that apple tree grew and it was loaded with apples. And this was, you know, the very beginning of the year, January. And if you're like a wayward traveler, that apple tree is like a blessing. Or for all the animals there, that's like a total blessing because that's like a desert landscape. And like, this is north of Shasta. But if we all went out there and planted these things, how much better the world would be. And we have this power to destroy the planet, but we also, more than any other species, have this ability to alter it for the benefit of the entire world. Because we have hands, we have ambition and willpower, right? A whale with its flippers can't plant anything, but we can grab these things and like plant them, and you do that on a global scale, and our planet could be an absolute paradise. And so then Dr. Bronner is saying that, you know, plant 10 trees and your place in heaven is guaranteed. And I think people underestimate the truth of that statement, but it is, and anyone can do that. I think that's really powerful.
I agree. We should create a challenge for the audience or anybody who listens to this podcast to plant 10 seeds, plant 10 trees, and get back to Ken. It's all about the biology. Let's see in 2025 if we've actually accomplished a significant plant installation.
I mean, it could take it doesn't have to take any time at all. I save a lot of seeds, and often I have them with me, so when I just find a good spot, I just put them in. And there's this idea of like planting natives, and I understand that. I get it. I think it's good to plant natives first, but I also don't think it's a crime to plant an apple tree somewhere, right? Like, it's a good thing. If it's just like a wasteland with some like sagebrush, let's say, and there's like nothing, like, let's put in some things that are going to help the ecosystem that may not be native, but I think God and the earth will be very happy you did that.
So I have a hypothesis that I will defend to the end. There's no such thing as an invasive.
Oh yeah.
Sooner or later, all of these things change. The Sahara Desert was a savanna. It ain't anymore. It's a desert.
Mm-hmm.
So Was that an evasive thing that occurred? No, it's part of nature. Like things come and go. That's what she does. Did we speed up that time frame? Hell yeah. We bought boats and now we brought stuff with us from one continent to another. Sure, we sped it up. Was it going to happen anyway? Hell yeah. Look, think about birds. Think about, you know, coconuts. Think about waterways, about currents. It's going to happen. It's just going to happen on a geological scale, not on a human scale, time scale. So I think that, you know, the word evasive, like climate change, like, you know, all these things are just humans' way of creating crisis, to create awareness, to shift a idea or shift a population into something that is perhaps more being manipulated than it is a reality.
I think there's forces at play that want to disempower people and take away the memory of like what one of our roles as humans on this planet is, which is to be stewards of the land. And we, more than any species, can be the prime fertility agent for the planet. Like we talk about bees being pollinators and like hummingbirds and all these wonderful insects and creatures, and like God bless every single one of them, but no creature more than us has the ability to impact if we decide to take that up, because a bee cannot plant a tree. You know, birds do some stuff. So when I was driving back from Bend, I was stopped at Shasta because it was really beautiful, took some amazing photos.
I love that.
And the energy is amazing there. The mountain. And I saw mullein plants growing, and they were everywhere, and it was winter now, so there were still some leaves on them, but a lot of them had their stalks and their seeds. So I was like, well, mulleins growing here. So I grabbed 6 stalks.
Nice.
I didn't take too much because I didn't want to affect it, but there were so many. So I grabbed 6 stalks. Some of them still had their seeds in there. I took 3 with me to my local park where I did this Buckeye thing, just my hike. And I spread some of those out. Hopefully those mullein take, because a lot of those hillsides in Napa, this is kind of like near like East Napa, it's just like grass growing and some other little plants. But like mullein would be a great addition to that ecosystem, I think. So I grabbed some mullein. Hopefully they take. And then I have a few more, which I'm going to spread out nearby at my garden. And I hope that they take as well. But like with the garden that's just nearby where I'll do this, I also put in some borage, and those are great because once they get going, you don't have to touch them anymore. They just pop up randomly now, and they're amazing pollinators, and you can eat the leaves if you want. They're quite tasty, and like I like building ecosystems that do that. Once you put them in, they kind of just like pop up when needed, and they're medicinal or they're edible. They can be used. And it was no sweat off my back. I was taking photos. I saw the mullein. I just snapped off a couple of the stalks, and then I'm spreading out the seeds. And it's like no sweat off my back. But that's just a consciousness thing. Like, are you going to be conscious enough to see that opportunity and then to do it for the earth?
Nice. Love it. Love it. And mulleins are an amazing herb. I actually have a friend sending me some mullein tincture for throat issues, throat irritations.
Say that again.
A friend sending me a mullein tincture for throat irritations.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, mulleinn's a fantastic plant.
And I think that's a good segue into Stefan. Tell Leighton about your new coffee mix that you're coming out with.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm actually drinking it right now. This is the French press. I did a trial run for my organic teas this summer. Like last summer, I made 100 units of 3 different tea blends.
Okay.
One was Tranquility, another was Vitality, and then the third one was Electricity, which was a herbal cafe. It had some yerba mate in it. It's like a coffee alternative, but much gentler. Just like a boost me up. The Vitality was for hormones, like hormonal health. And then Tranquility was like an overall general health and wellness tea blend, and also really good for the digestive system, inflammation, any sort of chronic issue, whatever. enhancing parasympathetic activity, just like herbal teas that were like well formulated, all organic. And those sold out. So now I am expanding the tea line with a new batch. There's going to be significantly more units. And I'm going to sell them through Amazon. And I'm adding in a spirituality tea blend, which has blue lotus flower, mugwort, passion flower, and chamomile, which work really well together synergistically for like enhancing dreams or creating those like liminal spaces that you can enter into, or just enhancing like meditation and stuff. But I'm also making a trial run for an herbal coffee. So it's 4 parts coffee for 2 parts roasted dandelion root and then 1 part chaga mushroom. And that's what
Nice. I gotta put this guy out because I think he's about to let
okay.
go. But keep talking. Keep talking.
So I've been experimenting with that, and I'll be offering that soon for anyone that's watching. You'll get all the updates as I finally get it released. But that's been really, really tasty, and you know these herbs are our allies. So I'm happy to offer that for everybody.
And they can find that by going directly to your website and getting a link to Amazon through there.
Yeah, eventually. It's not up yet, but it will be very soon. I'll definitely mention it on my channel as well. It's going to start to be the standard end screen for my channel. But those are really great, and people really like them. So that's why I'm offering those to people again, because it's hard to find high quality. I mean, not super hard if you know where to look, but a lot of things are so diluted nowadays. Or like, for example, Burt's Bees, you know, is great products, and then they got bought out, and then they changed the entire ingredient list. Like, I was talking about this at this party. Like, for some reason, some people are unable to preserve purity. Like, their intentions aren't aligned, or maybe it's just something you're born with. But Dr. Bronner's, for example, you look at their ingredient list and it's just like actual soap. You get their soap and it's like saponified oil. It's not all these sodium lauryl sulfates and stuff. It's like actual soap, and it continues to be actual soap. And that guy or that family has done exceptionally well by staying pure to those concepts of like, we are not going to change what we're offering. We're just going to actually offer what we got. And so there seems to be this force though where a lot of people fail to stick to the purity of the root of what they initially offer, like Burt's Bees. And I for me it's like I don't ever see why I would walk back on, like, that's just how you have to do it for like an herbal tea blend or this new coffee. Like, that's just how you have to make it. Like, I would never want to like turn this into some cheapo coffee powder where I then dust in some extract and call it a mushroom coffee, where the physiological effect though is nothing, because now you're getting 5 milligrams or 10 milligrams of reishi extract, and who knows what it was grown on, right? Like, you need high quality stuff, and why would you ever want to go back on that? Because at the end of the day, you're offering like a service to people. Like, if you water it down, then they don't actually get what they want, and that's not going to help you in the long run. It's not going to help them. It's just a complete farce. So, but I hope that these teas are helpful for people. So you'll be seeing anyone on the live stream now that's part of my channel, and for everyone that's also on the Soil Matters, like, if you're interested in those, you'll see them soon. But I don't have them available yet. I'm just doing the testing right now.
Fantastic. Well, great work. And this is normally usually a little bit before this. We go to questions because sometimes they take a little time to answer. So Ken, you want to bring on the questions and see where we go from there?
Sure. We've got 3 here. One from earlier in the show. Is there a hidden object orbiting the sun? That's definitely one for Stefan.
Not that I know. Well, actually, let's look at this a little different. I think there's this idea that there's like 2 suns, or like planet X. And so there are these gravitational anomalies in like the outer planets that are not fully explained, but they're not large. But I mean, if there was a second sun, I think we would see it. So I'm pretty confident of saying there's not a second sun in our system. I also don't think like the sun is fake. I think the sun is real. But in regards to like hidden objects orbiting the sun. That's what goes back to with our talk about these Kuiper Belt objects. I think there's way more of them than we think there are because they're very far out there. They're very tiny, and like so it's really a question of how much light are they reflecting? Do we even see it? Does it pass in front of our scope? Are we observing that part of the sky? Their orbital periods can be super long, so you have to track the movement of them.
Mhm.
And some of these things, their orbital periods like thousands of years. Not Pluto's like 300 something, right, or 200, whatever. It's a long time. Um, so I think there's a lot of things orbiting our sun very far out, highly elliptical orbits that we're not even aware of, that we will start to be aware of. And some of them are more significant than we think. Like, for example, Eris. According to this astrologer I met yesterday, Henry, he said that Eris is bigger than Pluto. I have to still check that myself. But, we think of Pluto as like it's a dwarf planet, but still like Pluto, it's not an asteroid. And
Yep.
Eris is supposedly bigger than Pluto and it's out there orbiting around. So, like, yeah, there's a lot of things orbiting our sun that we are just now learning about and will continue to learn about for a long, long, long time. As we even move into these new regions and pick up more of them, I think. So,
Hey,
Yep.
let's not forget that interstellar object that's floating around our galaxy too. That big tube that has
Mhm.
uh, a shape that is inconsistent with our understanding of how objects travel in space and time. It's a long tube that's been floating around for a period of time. So who knows? Like Stefan saying, there could be many of these small. And I mean, think about how perfect a spaceship, a planetoid would be. You set up everything underground, some solar panels on the surface, the inner core stays warm. You could
mm.
travel across, universes and galaxies. Oh shit, where did he go? Sorry.
Oh, it's all puppy love, Leighton. It's all puppy love.
Yeah, the universe is an interesting place. We know very little about it. And I think it's good to keep an open mind and also to be. I think it's better to be skeptical of being so sure on something rather than being skeptical of things that we aren't that sure of. Like
Yeah.
why is someone so certain that something's a certain way? Like that is what I'm more skeptical of,
I
personally.
love how, most of the conspiracy theories from when I was young have been proven as science fact, and they're no longer theories anymore. It's
Yeah.
amazing how that happens as our technology advances. Let's move on to another one here. Stefan, what do you make of the new info regarding the human and resonance as now talked about on Anton's channel?
Well, I don't know who Anton is, and maybe
Okay,
they spelled human instead of Schumann.
I
But
think so.
um, we I guess just what I can launch. I'm going to be making videos on this more specifically. I already have. I'll be making more with time. But there is, there's going back to Itzhak Bentov, and even before that, I'm absolutely like there has to be before him. But Itzhak Bentov back in the 60s and the 70s, he was part of the CIA Project Gateway.
Right.
He was an Israeli like cardiologist. He made a whole bunch of devices to measure your cardiovascular system, heartbeats, and all this and stuff. And he developed a framework of consciousness, which is that everything is conscious to some degree, and there's different
Mhm.
levels and stages. Um, Now in like the scientific literature, there's something called general resonance theory, and this was first coming out back in like 2012 or so about how if something vibrates, it has an iota of consciousness and everything's vibrating. So even the most basic of objects, stone, or even just like a small thing, whatever, has some level of consciousness because it's vibration. And it's vibration that's the carrier of consciousness. And the higher the vibratory essence of something, the more conscious it is. So that's general resonance theory. Um, and so I think what we're realizing is that as energies change, so does consciousness and so does our perception of reality. And so
Mhm.
this goes into how you change your own internal vibrations, what vibrations and energies are you surrounding yourself in your environment? Like what streams of energy are we passing through as a solar system, as a galaxy? Like how the different dimensions are manifesting and demanifesting into our normal perception of reality. Like there's so many ways you can go with this, but in general, uh, general resonance theory, I think is pretty spot on. Because I mean, just you can do meditations with certain things and feel certain areas and feel the energy and consciousness of it. And yeah, I think it's kind of like, why are we conscious? And then we look at a dog, we're like, oh yeah, a dog is smart, it's conscious. But then all of a sudden it gets turned off at like a mouse or something. Like, where's the line? Like, I don't think there really is. Or plants, like they have a consciousness, but we think plants aren't. Like, where's the line? I don't think there really is a line. I think it's just a spectrum, and it scales out. Um,
And even in bacteria.
yeah,
I was
yeah,
gonna say the biology it's what builds every cell, so it's got to look at that DNA and RNA to be able to put that cell together. So it's a lot more intelligent than we give it credit for.
Hell yeah.
yeah. And there's horizontal gene transfer with these microbes. They influence
Yep.
our behaviors and our consciousness through the production of like neurotransmitters and fatty acids and all these things. Like, they are a part of our resonance and they affect us very deeply. And so we have to nourish a good microbiome, and that starts with the soil and nourishing like living soil. I just read a paper, Ken. I'm sure you know this already, but I just read a paper coming out where they looked at the difference in cannabis strains. One was grown outdoors, living soil. The other was indoors. The metabolic profiles between these plants are different. They were clones. They had two different types of plants. They cloned them identical, and the cannabinoid ratios were radically different on the outdoor grown. They had less THC, more of the other cannabinoids. Indoor grown specifically really focused on THC, it seems, metabolically, but it was more oxidized and degraded than the outdoor samples. Even though outdoor had sunlight, which is, of course, oxidizing, right? UV radiation, all this. But just being indoors took away some of the beneficial quality of cannabis. And that's, I think, this idea of indoor and outdoor resonance. Like, are you spending your time outside? Are you spending your time inside? How does that change your resonance, your consciousness, your metabolic profile? Right? That's very, very important, I feel like.
Amen to that.
You know,
I'll send you that article. I'll send you that paper, Ken.
Yeah, please, because I know that we had Josh from BioAg on, and he was mentioning that cannabis grown in a living soil will last on the shelf for years, where cannabis grown in indoor in a hydroponic situation is not going to last, 6 months generally on average.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a big difference there.
Yeah.
So now we're getting into hairs on your body work like little antenna, no? And I have to say yes, because for anybody that doesn't know, there is gold in our hair, which is actually the most vibratorily active substance on our planet. So that's one of the reasons I have my long hair, is to connect more with that energy and the frequency and vibration of everything that's around me, whether that's plants, the animals, or just the planet and the universe. Leighton,
Yep, the energy source. You know that's why I grew my hair, Ken. And I have a cute little anecdotal story that my father, whenever I got out of control, he cut all my hair off. He shaved it. Because he swore that the longer my hair got, the more crazy I got. And it was picking up energy.
Yeah, I'm going to be cutting my hair soon. Yeah, gold is the most conductive metal, as far as I know. And then also proteins are quite conductive. So, I mean, this is all, collagen protein, basically. So.
And we've got one last question that just came in. Are you familiar with Ra-Ur-Hun and his work called the Human Design System? Sorry.
Yeah, I study astrology a lot because it seems to keep verifying that it is something. But I have pulled up my human design. It's very interesting, but it's newer on the scene. One of my buddies, he's been studying for like 6+ years, so that's what he's really gone into significantly. And I don't think it'd be popular if there wasn't something to it. and it incorporates the I Ching, which I really like the I Ching. And so my buddy Robert, he doesn't really do I Ching divination. So when we were talking about that, he was super interested because he's like, "Oh, you can do divination with these like hexagrams and everything." He's read them from like the human design perspective. Um, but yeah, I am familiar with that. That may eventually get incorporated into like the content I create, but right now I've done much more study into astrology, and um, I think that's been much more proven with time. Like, what was it? Hoorah, that guy is his name, his interesting name. He supposedly like had this information channeled to him from a higher source. And so I'm just more skeptical of that. Doesn't mean it didn't happen, but there's only been like, let's say maximum 20 years or something, or maybe a little bit more. I don't know exactly when it came out, but it's not 5,000, 10,000 years. Like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey with the astrological alignments goes back to like 10,000 plus years ago. They just found something in Russia recently, which it has these same alignments. And these astrology definitely has something to it. Human design, I think, is more in a higher realm, a higher dimension of understanding. And I think it's really interesting. I don't think it's maybe the most relevant to the average person yet because it's just too beyond them. It's too early adopter for them. But there's definitely something to it. I have my chart and it resonates. So
Cool.
So-
Well, I definitely have to bounce. I got Cheeto freaking out outside. He won't go to the bathroom. So, but listen, Stefan, thank you so much for coming on and sharing and having the courage to talk about things that are outside the box that a lot of people are fearful that they would be judged for. So thank you for your courage, your love, your respect, and your time, of course. And Ken, as always, thank you so much, my friend, for the hard work you do.
We're going to actually have Stefan with Andy, hopefully on this Wednesday, because you know how Andy Lopez is going to go.
Oh, hell yeah. They'll have a blast. That'll be one of the records.
All right. We hope it happens.
Okay, guys. Well, hopefully we'll see you guys on Wednesday on the Gardens the Untold Story with Andy Lopez, myself, and hopefully we'll have Stefan on. So, hey guys, peace out, and we'll see you on the next.